Yes,
Okay.
so you are live.
Hare Krishna, Dandavats, all glories to Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj, all glories to Guru Parampara, all glories to the one and only, his ever-blessed Sri Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. We begin today's program. Our topic for today is Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, Karma Yoga in Krishna Consciousness by Svabhava. We'll start with Mangalacharan prayers. Aname, are you ready? Yunesh. We'll start with Jayarada Madhava. Go ahead, Aname.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhu Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo.
We'll say some Mangala prayers now. So if you are initiated or if you are under the shelter of a guru, please say a Guru Pranam mantra into your mind, followed by Srila Prabhupada mantra. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Desa Tarine Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Guruna Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sakana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadavaitam Savadutam Prajnasaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrinda Manishwari Vrashbhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatrubhacha Kapasiddhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hari Bol. So today's, I won't say lecture, but a talk is about how the first few chapters of Bhagavad Gita connect to each other. Starting from, well, chapter 1 is where Arjuna raises his doubt and his perplexity. And really, chapter 2 is where the actual lessons start. And chapter 2 is also called the contents of the Gita summarized. So chapter 2 contains summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita, but things don't just go that smoothly. So with Arjuna asking some questions, chapter 2 goes on to chapter 3, and then chapter 4, and chapter 5, chapter 6, till the first initial Karma Yoga section mixed with a little bit of Gyan ends. And then the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, which are the Bhakti Yoga, start, and towards the end, the last 6 chapters about the Gyan Yoga, leading once again to renunciation and surrender. So today we will be looking only at the first 1/3 of the Bhagavad Gita, and that too in the first 5 chapters. In recent past, some of my talks over here in ISV were about Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. So today we'll connect from chapter 2 to chapter 5 and we will look at the standard way of connecting it, the obvious way, the how in Bhagavad Gita as it is by chapter names, these chapters have been connected. Also, we'll try to find an alternate mechanism of how these chapters can potentially be connected. But that second part is a surprise. We'll leave it to the end. Let's go to the rigor of going through each of these chapters and understanding how do these chapters develop from 2 all the way to 5. So, sorry. So in chapter number 1, Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks certain questions of what is his reasons for not fighting. And he gives them as compassion, enjoyment, since family breaks the tradition, parampara, or kutumba, and then his indecision. And Krishna answers them systematically in the second chapter. And in the first, so I think over here till around the 7th, this is where Arjuna says, I am confused now about my duty, I have lost all composure, and I am accepting you as my guru. So I am your disciple now. Please instruct me. So now he is surrendering to Krishna. And Krishna, being friend of Arjuna, now takes a different mood, that of a guru. And this is where the relationship drives further. So from verse number 11 all the way to verse number 30, Krishna gives the jnana or knowledge about the soul. And curiously, there are some very, very famous verses here. All of those things about the soul. But the point to note over here is, while soul is being described over here, for example, soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon. It is unbreakable, insoluble, it is invisible, inconceivable. The aspects about the soul, even though we think they are qualities of soul, are not per se qualities of soul. They are actually qualities of the material nature. And how is that so? Because if you look at it, almost all of these qualities are talking about not this and not that. It's essentially neti neti. For example, in this verse, it is said, it cannot be cut to pieces by any weapon. So, the ability to cut something by weapon is not an attribute of the spiritual world. It is an attribute of the material world. To be burned by fire, again, an attribute of the material world. To be moistened by water, that means you kind of liquidate its position. So there is no concept of sthita in the material world. So all of these things, not withered by wind, not insoluble, cannot be burned, cannot be dried. All of these things, the change aspect is really an attribute or essential underlying attribute of the causal world. And that is why, if you notice, all of these soul's properties are really neti neti. So that's point number 1. So having given this gyan that, hey, Arjuna, you're not really killing anyone. So as a reply to your compassion, Arjuna was trying to show compassion as a reason not to fight. Then Krishna, giving some gyan and Sankhya Yoga mix, Krishna goes on to the next few verses, and from about 31 to about 38 verse, that's where Krishna is giving answer to Arjuna's problem about how would I enjoy with? If all my cousins are getting killed and those are my suhada or my mitra or my family. So Krishna says over here, hey, you're going to enjoy anyway, because even if you die, you're going to go to heaven. If not, you're going to enjoy the kingdom. So it's not that you're not going to enjoy. So he gives some karma kanda and some sakam karma yoga over here. After that, around 39th verse is where Krishna changes from this mood or this style of giving the knowledge to another one, which he says, now I will describe you in terms of working without fruitive results. And this is described as Buddha Yukto, Buddhir Yogi. So curiously, Krishna does not describe it as Karma Yoga as people traditionally understand it. And even the Prabhupada has transferred as terms of working without fruitive results. Really, Buddhi Yoga is the conceptual description of how Krishna is now advising Arjuna. And this is in reply to Arjuna's question that, hey, I don't want to commit sins, because when I kill, and there are millions of people over here, so I would basically be earning a lot of sin. So how do I counter that? So what Krishna is giving in these about 15 verses is knowledge about Nishkam Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga, right? And towards the end of this chapter, around the 53rd, 54th verse, is where, having learned about Nishkam, Sakam, Karam Kanda, Sankhya, little bit each, and that's why this chapter is a summary. Krishna, before he could go further, Arjuna asked him the question about status of, or the some more elaboration on the term Sthita Pragya. So Sthita Pragya means, Sthita means one who is kind of stationed or settled into, with a settled Pragya is intelligence. So one whose intelligence is fixed. And why does Arjuna ask this? Because the previous verses, Krishna is describing Buddhi Yoga. So one whose Buddhi is fixed after doing Buddhi Yoga, what are his characteristics or tendencies? So in this description, there are 4 questions that were asked. What are the symptoms of one who is conscious as well? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Out of these 4 sections of speak basically means what are his symptoms, and then speech means what is his reaction to blames, etc. And then how does he sit? That means how does he control himself? How does he, you can say, for lack of better words, sense control. So how does he control himself in his interaction with the world, samsara? And how does he walk? That means how does he engage himself? So control is where some things are not conducive to his practices, and walk is where he can manage the situation. So out of these, the one that is really conspicuous is the sit part, which is a sense control part. And in this entire chapter, while Nishkam Karma Yoga is the central theme that is going to come out, which will last for the next few chapters, another theme that is coming out, which is what I want to connect in my second part of today's talk, is the sense control part. So sense control is a very essential theme that comes out of chapter 2 in Bhagavad Gita, along with the Nishkam Karma Yoga. So in brief, if you connect the two together, with sense control, one can actually be able to do Nishkam Karma Yoga. And by Nishkam Karma Yoga, Arjuna's problems are solved, and his confusion is solved, and therefore he'll be able to lead a decent life, whatever he's supposed to do, dharma, right? So let's see verse number 44 over here, because that is, we need to connect why sense enjoyment is being highlighted by me as an important aspect here. So this verse 244 talks about Bhogashvarya Prasaktanam Tayaparat Chetasam Vyavasatmika Buddhi Samadhavana Vidiyate. So Bhogashvarya, so this is enjoyment has to be curtailed. It cannot be unstinted or something that doesn't have a basis. It cannot be at one's free will or at willy-nilly what Bhog and Ashvarya someone is delving into in their worldly life. So this is where this material enjoyment getting controlled is an aspect that comes out from Nishkam Karma Yoga verses. And when Sthit Pragya questions are asked and Krishna re-emphasizes this part, then we can take that as one of the themes that come out of chapter 2. Let's go on to the next chapter. Okay, so one more thing that comes out over here is verse number 47. Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karmphal heturbhur mate sango akarmani. So this is a description of how one should actually pursue Nishkam Karma Yoga. So you have the right to perform your prescribed duty, but not entitled to the fruits of action. So this can be taken as a rule of Vairagya. Never consider also the cause of the results of your activity. Never be attached to not doing your duty. Why am I saying Vairagya? Because when one does Nishkam Karma Yoga, then Vairagya is an automatic result or outcome of that pursuit. So come back, connect the dots. First thing that Krishna informs is the Sankhya Yoga information about the reality of one's existence is the soul. So that's the first rule of Vairagya, that is, one is not body, one is soul. So how can one be doing something? It's really body which is doing something. Second rule of Vairagya is this particular verse, which is you have a right to perform prescribed duty, so you're not entitled to the fruits of action. The two rules of Vairagya are given in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. So 2 rules of Vairagya, the concept of Nishkam Karma Yoga, 2, and the third thing is the concept of sense control. So let me just write this down over here. NKY, then okay, so with these 3 concepts, we can go on to the next chapter, which is chapter number 3. So in the chapter number 3, Krishna, Arjuna starts by connecting 2 and 3. Obviously, he didn't connect it. That's how it got connected. He's basically confused. Hey, Krishna, you're telling me at one point of time to not act, another point of time to act, because you gave me some concept about jnana, other concepts about action and fighting. So I'm a little confused. Specifically, he says about 237 and 240, 238, where he says, fight for the sake of fighting. And 249 is where he says, Duren hi avaram karm buddhi yoga. So distance yourself from the lowly abominable action by buddhi yoga. So he says both things, and that's what Arjuna wants to clarify and ask question to Krishna, saying, hey, Krishna, can you tell me which one really is you want me to really pursue? So in this case, Krishna starts by telling you there are 2 types of yogis. One is the Jnana Yogi and the Karma Yogi, and then he goes on over there. So talking a lot more about some details about Nishkam Karma Yoga and also about Karam Kanda. So the verses over here that go delve into Nishkam Karma Yoga, the first few verses, and it is basically, this entire chapter is kind of comparing both Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga representing sannyas, or one in which one doesn't do activity or prevents activity, and Nishkam Karma Yoga is where activity is done, but in a manner which is not keeping away from karma. By the way, please note that even for people who are sannyasis or karma yogi, jnanis, it's not that they don't do karma at all or they don't do activity. It is that they don't do Vedic activity, but the Laukic activity they still need to do. Whatever is basic things, right? They'll have to take bath, they'll have to eat food, and they have to think, and thinking is an action too, and they earns karma, not in these Kali Yuga, but in all other yugas. So there is karma to be done by both. The only thing is, does the obvious one, which is coming from Varnashrama or the Dharma, is that one to be done, or is that one to be avoided, because karma entangles at a high level, right? So just like it would have entangled Arjuna if he had gone ahead and fight with his original understanding. So with that, the thing to watch out over here is that in this chapter, towards the end, as Krishna describes the various sections of this chapter, comes out a secondary theme, which is another takeaway from this. The first theme that comes out is that verse number 9, I think. Yeah. So yagna arthat karmano anyat lokoyam karmandana. So if you don't do karma for the sake of yagya or Vishnu, then you will fall into karmandana. So that's one thing that comes out. So let me just write that down. That's one thing. The second thing that comes out is the concept of things towards the end, where Arjuna asks a question. So here, let me see. So yeah, I think verse number 36 is where Arjuna interrupts Krishna and then asks a question. Over here, actually before this, there is one more concept that has come out. It's about prescribed duties. So let me search this. So one is that you have to do karma for yagya. And then how do you do that? You do it by prescribed duties. Yagya is born of prescribed duties. So the concept that we can write down over here as our key takeaway from. Okay, so now the next concept that comes out from verse number 3 is where Arjuna asks the question. And his question is, by what is one impelled to sinful acts? Now, why is Arjuna asking about sinful acts? If we go back to our original set of questions that were raised by Arjuna, they were why he doesn't want to fight, compassion, enjoyment, sins, family breaker, indecision. So if you look at it, if someone doesn't have compassion, I mean, it is an essential nature of someone who rises up in yoga. But if they don't do compassion, it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's not something that's going to prevent them to get to mukti or into higher states of spiritual existence. Same with enjoyment. If they don't delve into enjoyment, if they don't enjoy the sansar as one is going into rising up in his spirituality, not a problem at all. I mean, in fact, sometimes the Lord Himself forces someone to take enjoyment, like the case of Prahlad Maharaj, right? Also, yeah. So Prahlad Maharaj became the king after his dad was killed by the Lord, and then obviously Dhruv Maharaj also. So both cases, the Lord is making one enjoy, because enjoyment is the basic nature of the soul. Vedanta Sutra number 12 says that, right? Anandmaya Abhyasat. But if someone doesn't go into enjoyment, that's okay, not a big problem. It doesn't prevent oneself to be able to pursue the path of yoga. But the third question that was raised by Arjuna is about sins. And that is a very important aspect, because that has to be answered. And while Krishna gave out that, hey, you do practice Nishkam Karma Yoga, the question is that Arjuna is not very clear. Hey, if someone is a karmi, they end up doing sins, very understandable. They don't have the concept of what is the Vedic or dharmic duty. But how is it that even people who are following the Varnashram Dharma or following a dharmic life, why are they impelled into sinful acts? So this is a very relevant question, and for this answering, Krishna informs that, hey, Arjuna, it is because of lust that one ends up doing sinful acts. So what I'm trying to drive at is the lust is another key theme. It's a secondary theme, but it is a key theme that comes out from chapter number 3. So let me note that down too. So far from BG2 and BG3, we have two. These are our notes that has come out. And another aspect that comes out, a sub-second or a tertiary aspect about the secondary aspect called lust, is Krishna says two things. One is verse number 41 and another is verse number 43. In verse number 41, Krishna says, in the very beginning, curb this great sin of lust by regulating the senses. He's saying, curb it by regulating the senses. So regulation of senses is an important aspect. So we'll go back to our notes and let me note that down too. And the second thing is, in last verse of this chapter, Arjuna is informed by Krishna that other than that, you also have to conquer the lust. So one is curb the lust, that means reduce it. The other is conquer, means decimate it or finish it off. And how do you do that? You do it by steadying the mind. But you cannot steady the mind unless your intelligence is spiritualized. So our notes for this is regulate the senses to curb lust and spiritualize intelligence that leads to steadying of mind that conquers lust. So with these two-pronged action, the NKY, Nishkam Karma Yoga's enemy, lust, will be decimated. And if that happen, then one will be able to unstintedly pursue the path of dharma, and therefore be able to not be in a position where a typical karmi that is represented by Arjuna at the start of this Bhagavad Gita is, where he's lost, he doesn't know what to do, but he somehow does things just because he has a sense of proprietorship or lordship over his circle of comfort. And whichever part of life he is not able to understand, he treats that as coincidence. So that's a typical karmi position. There's two sections of their life. Part A, where they think they're the Lord and they control things. If somehow something's happened, they'll say, oh, this must be it, and that is the way I did it. Or if something's out of their control, they kind of treat it as that this is a coincidence, so this is just a circumstance. So they are only treating themselves as the unique and the sole proprietor of this entire world. So from that sequence of things is that we have reached in chapter 3 is that if lust is controlled by studying the mind, which comes from spiritualizing intelligence, then everything else will fall into place. Now let's go into chapter number 4. So in chapter number 4, Krishna provides a transcendental knowledge, and this is what is helping to spiritualize the intelligence, because transcendental knowledge, and therefore help to be able to study the mind. And in this chapter number 4, Krishna talks about flow of the knowledge through lineage, parampara. It is established by Krishna. So these are the various verses over here. It is his knowledge about his divine appearance. I think verse number 9. Keywords over here. Jan karuchame divyam evam veti tatvata tatvadayam punarjanma naeti. Not, you will not come back. Mam eti. So Arjuna, once you attain me, you will not come back here. That's what it is. His janma and karma. That itself is divyam. It is transcendental. I want to know this veti tatvata. So that's it. They will not, punarjanma will not happen to them. Apunar after them. So this is one aspect about his knowledge, but I mean, transcendental knowledge, other aspects also given about Krishna. And in the middle of this chapter is from verse number 25 to 33 is information provided on what are the various types of sacrifices. So in chapter number 3, 2, we had seen that sacrifice was mentioned. And what is this sacrifice? This is a sacrifice for going via demigods to Vishnu, but essentially it is talking about Sakam Karma Yoga at this stage. So if demigods are happy and people are happy and they're doing their activity which is oriented towards based on their prescribed duty as a yajna, so demigods will please them and people get pleased. So the cycle of sacrifice is going on. But it's only Sakam Karma Yoga, right? It's not really leading to Nishkam Karma Yoga. In chapter number 4, Krishna talks about various sacrifices, and these sacrifices are based on different people's material consciousness. So some people may be very advanced and they might be able to sacrifice into the fire of Brahman, whereas others who are leading Varnashram system, for example, verse number 26, are related brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. So they are trying to practice mind control, right? And the regulated householders, the grihasthas, not grahamedis, they are sacrificing their senses in the fire of senses. So they are not trying to enjoy the sense objects, they are trying to sacrifice, but leading a controlled life or regulated life, right? So likewise, a lot of other yajnas are also given over there, and they are all leading to different elevations depending on the material consciousness of the persons involved over there. So our theme over here, the 4th chapter, is transcendental knowledge and sacrifices based on is a function of material consciousness and different sacrifices. So that is one aspect that is given over here. Now, immediately after this chapter ends, chapter 5 starts. And over here, Arjuna cannot control himself, and now he's confused, just like he was in chapter 3, starting saying, hey Krishna, clarify, because you said earlier that one who is in knowledge doesn't need to do any action, whereas you are still asking me to fight. So what exactly do you want me to do? I mean, do you want me to work or do you want me to renounce work? If renouncing work is the higher stage, then I might as well do that. So which of these two is more beneficial? Yet Shreya Eteyor, which is Shreya means which is better, beneficial. Bru is Sunishchitam. Please tell me definitely. Nishchit means decide and tell me. So over here, Krishna informs that, hey, Arjuna, both things can be pursued. Renunciation, sannyasa, where you kind of move yourself away from your Vedic duties, but not from your Laukic. The other duties, which are your essential duties, you don't go away from. But your dharmic duties, the ones that you would do as part of your dharma, that one, if you step away from and then just renounce them, that is okay. But between the two, the devotional service, which is like karma yoga, the one in which you do yoga of karma, rather than renunciation of karma sannyasa, the karma yoga is better. So these are the first few verses that describe about these two positions. And this is the second time Arjuna had asked, so Krishna has re-clarified. So it becomes clear to Arjuna that, okay, fine. But then the question still comes is, how to do it? And what is the hashra, means what is the end goal of a person who pursues this path? So again, the next few verses, about 7 to 16, they talk about yogi who fixes. So we are already into karma yoga because it's better. But if at all, how to pursue that? So there is a possibility for a karma yogi to actually focus on their atma. And there's another possibility where they can focus on Paramatma. Obviously, one on focusing on Paramatma is a higher stage, and that comes later. But before that, I would like to point out one particular verse. Only the verse number 4 over here. Sankhya Yoga Patak Bala, Pavanti na Pandita. So one who is a Pandita, as a learned person, he will not ascribe himself to Sankhya Yoga because Bala means it is a less intelligent path, because if you see them differently, right? And the reason is that Ekam Apyastita Samya. So they are giving both Obhyor, Vindativa. So they are giving Vindativa gives, enjoys the Phalam. Result is the same. And how is it same? Because they are two different paths. How can they possibly say, if one pursues Jnana Yoga, obviously Jnana will be their outcome, right? If someone pursues Karma Yoga, if they pursue Karma, obviously they can get Karma Phala. But if they do Karma Yoga, then they get detachment Vairagya, as we talked about, right? But how can it is over here said that you get from both, you get results of both? The answer is that while from the direct path you get one result, the other result you get as a byproduct of that. So when someone is pursuing Jnana Yoga and they get Jnana, Vairagya is a natural outcome of that. So at the end of having pursued Jnana Yoga to its completion or its fulfillment, then both Jnana and Vairagya will come. And if one pursues Karma Yoga, then Vairagya will come as a direct result, and Jnana will be coming as a byproduct of that. So ultimately, both results are available. However, because Krishna said, pursue Karma Yoga because it is easier, and that's a starting stage relatively compared to Karma Sannyasa, for which you need to have purity. And if you don't do Karma Yoga, you don't have the purity. So then such sannyasa is like Falgu. It's like Falgu Vairagya. Okay, so we talked about Nishkam Karma Yoga and renouncing the results of one's action through their mind rather than renouncing the action itself. Not Karma Sannyasa, but Karma Yoga, that to Nishkam Karma Yoga. Nishkam means, Kama means you have lost or some desire for it to be fulfilled. Nishkam is without any desire. Okay, so in this verse, in this chapter, around the middle, around verse 13 to 16, Krishna talks about three types of doers. Who are these three doers? One is the one who is Navdware Pure Dehi. That means that the Dehi, the one who is embodied, one who is living in this embodied situation or state, who of Navdware means 9 doors are there. So it's describing the body or Kshetra, and the soul is not a doer if they have manasa sannyasa. So if they are renounced from their mind, giving up attachment to activities, both to the karmaphala and to the if something happens, then proprietorship, both of them. So the first two rules of vairagya. If someone has done that, then they are nav kurvan na karyan. So that means they are not doing anything, nor they are causing it to be done. This concept about karma, karana, and kartatve. So these three concepts are there. So one is karma is obviously doing, and karan, you the cause of someone doing, and then kartatve is a proprietorship. Karta is the person who is doing it. So kartatva means one who tries to get satisfaction, or I won't say ego, but associates himself with the proprietorship or the fact that something is getting done. So kam, karan, kartatve. All three things, if one is not involved with, then that soul who is, even though in the embodied aspect, even they are in a body, they are not the doer. So this is the first doer in any activity. So this, if the soul misidentifies with the body, obviously it will consider itself as a doer, and therefore it will reap all the sukha and dukkha. But if it doesn't, then it is not the real doer. The second doer that is being mentioned in this chapter is verse number 14. Na kartatvam na karmani lokasa sajati prabhu. So this prabhu is the prabhu is used for the soul over here. So na karfal samyogam swavastu pravartate. So the embodied spirit does not create activity, nor does it induce people to act. All these are acted by the modes of material nature. So this is the second doer that is being discussed over here, which is the modes of nature. And herein comes our subtopic for the today's talk is Svabhava. So the word that is used by Krishna is Svabhavastu pravartate. So karma phal is samyoga, that is for the person who is renounced his attachment to the karma. But the one that is getting doing the real activity is the Svabhava. And Svabhava is translated as the modes of material nature. So Svabhava is the doer so far. Soul, not the doer if it is fixed properly. Sthit pragya. Svabhava is the doer. And the third doer that is being mentioned over here is 16th verse. Let me open that up. Jnanen tad 15th verse. Na datte kaschitit papam na chaiv sukritam vibhu. So vibhu is being mentioned. So soul is qualitative same as the Lord, but quantitative different, and therefore the terms anu and vibhu are used. Anu means junior or shorter or smaller or like so. So vibhu is for the Lord, bigger. That's the literal meaning. So vibhu also does not associate to the results. And is not a doer. So the translation simply goes, nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of their knowledge. So it is the embodied beings only who actually consider themselves the doer, but the real doer is Svabhava. So let's take note about this. VG5. Svabhava is the doer and not the soul if it's fixed properly, and obviously not the Lord. Okay, and verse number 16 says that why does this happen? Because the jnana gets covered. So when the jnana, ajnana is removed by jnana, then everything gets cleared up, just like the sun coming up, Adityavaj. And what does it illuminate? When sun comes up, it illuminates the world around us, right? So we are able to see so-called reality of this material world. So in the case of spiritual life, when the aditya of the jnana, the sun of knowledge rises up in one's spiritual life, then what does it prakashyati? What does it illuminate? It illuminates tatparam. Tatparam is so that param, one who is beyond, and that is translated here as Krishna consciousness, but you can say the supreme. So knowledge about the supreme or the consciousness about supreme is what comes out as a result of jnana, ajnana getting removed by jnana. And this jnana is the chapter number 4 that we talked about, the transcendental knowledge. So if someone gets the transcendental knowledge, then they get to know the param. And once they get to know the param, then 4 things are aligned. Tad buddhyas, tad atmanas, tad nishthas, tad parayana. So one is intelligence, one is mind, one is faith, and one is refuge or goal. And there are 4 aspects of the fixing this consciousness. So that is why these 4 aspects are mentioned. So who fixes the intelligence? Typically students in a material life, they want to fix the intelligence. And the mind, they're typically, let's say, academic scholars, especially of religious scholars, right? They try to fix their mind, right? Both, I'm talking about the Vedic system as well as the Western religious world. And then who fixes the faith? So these are researchers who love their research. For example, Shukracharya, Durvasa Muni. So these are the people who want to fix their faith, Tatnistas, and Tatparayana. So these are people who fix their refuge or the goal. Prahlad Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, right? They have fixed their goal of targeting or really aiming at the Bhagavan feature. So when these 4 things are fixed, then someone who pursues this path, their gyan nirdut kalmasha. So because of the jnana, nirdut means cleansing, kalmasha, all the perturbations or tribulations of this world, right? Misgivings is translated over here by Srila Prabhupada. So they'll all be cleansed, and then they will be basically cleaning away hridaya granthis. So these are the karmic dots, and once they clear away, then life becomes sweeter here, and prana flows well. And that's what the people who are doing the Kundalini and other things are trying to do. Essentially, jnana gets to that stage implicitly, and one pursues this path. Then gachanti apunarvritam. Apunar means re-happening, something that is repeating. So apunar means something that does not happen. What? Avritam. Avritam means he goes to a situation where you don't come back here on this material world. So basically, essentially, short, they get liberated. So these are the characteristics of someone who get the transcendental knowledge that will expose or illuminate the Tatparam, and they will follow these 4 typical paths, and they will ultimately be in the situation of where their kalmasha will be washed away, and therefore they are liberated. So having given this information, the 3 doers. So let's go back to our notes. So Svabhava is the doer. Nishkam Karma Yoga. If someone does, this term is called Yoga Yukta. Let me actually pull that up in our chapter number 5. Yoga Yuktatma. So this starts, I think, in verse number 7. But from verse 7 to 12 is where all the Yoga Yukta characteristics are informed. For example, someone is following Nishkam Karma Yoga. Yoga Yukto Vishuddhatma. So one who works in devotion is a pure soul, who controls mind and senses, and such man is never entangled. Right? So that's one characteristic of Yoga Yukta. The other characteristic of Yoga Yukta is they are in divine consciousness, although they are doing some verbs over here, Pashchan, Shadman, Sprashtan, Jigran, smelling, seeing, watching, touching, all of those things, then they don't get entangled. Sorry. Yeah. Because they realize that indriyan indriyartheshu, that means it is the senses which are engaging in sense objects. Vartantati dharyan. He's considering that dharyan means dharan, means thought. So he's considering that the indriya are only senses are involved with sense object. Indriyarth eshu. Indriyas artha. So objects of the sense or gratification of the senses. Okay, so let's go back. So this is the Yoga Yukta characteristics. Other Yoga Yukta characteristics are verse number 10. Kaya and Manasa Buddhya. So Kaya means body, Manasa mind, Buddhya intelligence, Kevalar Indriya Rapi, Indriya senses. So with all of this purified, Yogina Karma Kurvanti. So Karvanti Sangam Taktva. Sangam means attachment, Taktva means give up. They become Shuddha, means purified. So why are they doing activities? I mean, if they are so learned and informed and they don't have to do any activity, they are doing it for the purification, Shuddha. Only for the purpose of purification. Yukta karma phala tyaktva. So this is another yoga yukta characteristics. Phala, karma phala tyaktva. Tyaktva means give up. Tyaj, karma phalam. Results of their karma. So karma phala they give up. Shantim apnoti, they take him. So apnoti is like they get. Yeah, I think achieves. So it's same thing. Shantim. So they get peace, right? And Nastiki, original. In this case, Svabhava translated unflinching, but unflinching basically comes from the original primeval nature. So of Shanti. So Shanti can be of different types. As in today's world, we have a very unpeaceful peace. So not the Kali Yuga kind of peace, but the original Nastiki peace. Ayukta kam karena phale swakto nibadhyate. So they are not entangled by their work. So these are some characteristics of a Yoga Yukta person, the one who is pursuing Nishkam Karma Yoga. Now, dear devotees, please note that this Nishkam Karma Yoga is not the one where the Supreme is involved, because there are two ways to pursue even Nishkam Karma Yoga. Essentially, it means that you're not involved with the desires, but one can be doing the same Nishkam Karma Yoga as an offering to the Supreme, which is the later part of this chapter. And this part of the chapter is where one is pursuing Nishkam Karma Yoga as just from a karma point of view. Even if there's a Lord, it is not to rise up in bhakti. So it is not karma yoga pursuit going on to bhakti. So then the doers come in, and after the doers, I think verse 17 onwards is where when one fixes a yogi, a karma yogi fixes his mind on Paramatma. What is it that they get? So the previous one, when they were fixing 7 to 12, they were fixing their attention or mind on Atma, and therefore they get free from bondage. Whereas in this case, from verse 17 to 29, they are fixing their mind on Paramatma. So let's look at the verse 17. So we saw these verses, Tad Buddhya's Atmanas. Yeah. So I think then this is where the Pandita verse, the famous verse, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Vidya knowledge. So if that right knowledge, which is already coming from chapter 4, and Vinaya, so they also need to have humility, Sampanne. So because Vinaya, gentleness is the essential ingredient for one to pursue bhakti. If one does not develop humility or gentleness, then from Karma Yoga also, one can go on to Jnana Yoga, which is the Karma Sannyasa Yoga. So essentially, Karma Yoga one does, not the Karma Kanda, not the Sakam Karma Yoga, but one once pursues the Nishkam Karma Yoga, purity develops. And Jnana Yoga can be pursued after that. So if they do not have much of faith, Tat Prayana, but if they have Tat Buddhi and Tat Manasa, that means they're strong in their mind and intelligence, and they have faith in spirituality, but not necessarily Parayana, means surrender aspect is not there, then they will move on to the Jnana part. And if they move there, then such people can take up sannyas, and because they have purified themselves with basic Nishkam Karma Yoga. So, but one who has gone to that stage, if they are Pandita, they have become Samdarshana. So they look at all of the various entities who have consciousness in the material world: Brahmana, Gavi, cow, Hastini, elephant, Sunicha, Pakicha. So dog eater, all of them, right? One is in mode of goodness, passion, ignorance, Soka Pakicha, one who is dog eater also in mode of ignorance. All of this he sees Samdarshana. Why? Because he sees Paramatma, or the living, the conscious aspect, which is common to all of them. The Jiva is there, the Paramatma is there in all of them. So this is the looking beyond just the body, beyond the materialism, beyond the koshas of Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vigyanmaya Kosha, the intelligence, Anandmaya Kosha, going from soul and all the way to Paramatma. So this is a section about the Paramatma. And then what are the various other characteristics of person who's now focusing their mind on Paramatma? So they have these things which are not characteristic of persons who are self-realized or who are actually focusing their attention to their Atma. So these people, these yogis, they have sameness and equanimity. Maybe better terms over here is samya sthita mana. So their mana is sthita, means situation, samya, equanimity of mind. Nirdosham, so they are flawless Brahma. So their mind will be now residing into Brahman, which is flawless, and they will be Brahmani sthita. So they will be sthita in, or situated in Brahman. So Brahman situated, right? Next, so these people are, or these yogis are become Brahmavid. Brahmavid once Ved means knowledge. With Veda coming from the same root word. So they get the knowledge of Brahman and they sthita in Brahman. So Brahman sthita people, they not enjoy priyam, prapya. If they get something priya, if the prapya means they get it, so they don't become happy. Nodvija means perturbations. So if they get prapya, chapriyam, something that is apriya, so then they don't get, I would say frustrated, but maybe read it out over here. Agitated. Yeah, maybe that's a better word. And they don't get agitated by it, right? So they are basically Svabhava in that. Right? So one who achieves Brahman. Then Bhaya Swarsha, that is Indriya based interaction. Asaktatma, that means they can detach from that. Or rather, it could mean both unattached and detached. And what is there? There's attached, unattached, and detached. And there's a difference. Unattached means karma sannyasa. You don't just physically stray away from it, and detach means mentally stay away something, and that is what the path that Krishna is promoting, from Nishkam Karma Yoga to go to Bhakti Yoga. Because when one's is still engaging, right, Lord Shiva is a Lord coming from Bhagavad Tattva, and he is engaging with Maya. So how does he keep himself aloof, right? That is a detachment. But maybe some other lords or some sannyasis may not stay away from all of these worldly things, right? So Brahma Yoga Yuktatma. So now if you notice, it is the definition of Nishkam Karma Yoga slightly changed to say Brahma Yoga. And Yukta means one who's engaged in. So one who is engaged in Brahma Yoga, not just Nishkam Karma Yoga, but his focus of Nishkam Karma Yoga is targeted toward Brahman, the goal, Tat Prayana. Right? So Sukham Aksham Ashtute. Aksham means unlimited. Akshara, Vaikuntha is also called Akshara. Spiritual world is called Akshara, right? So one without Shara, one which doesn't end anytime. So Akshara, Sukham. So he gets unlimited bliss. So that is a happiness. So that comes for one who is focusing their mind onto Paramatma, and they keep themselves away from the external pleasures, attachments, and they enjoy internally. How? Atmani Sukham. So that is, so there is basically a progression over here. First, stay away from externals, Bhaisparsha Saktatma. Then, then they focus internally, Atmani Sukham. Then they, with the Sukha inside, they are able to do yoga to Brahma. They attach themselves to Brahman, and that's when they get the Phala Shruti of this, not Shruti, Phala Laina or Phala Pankti for this sutra or this shloka is that they get Akshara Sukham. And so far we have seen the result of one who is fixed into Brahman or tries to target Brahman, his mind onto Brahman. Now, from verse number 22 to 23, this chapter, Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 5, talks about the symptoms of a self-realized person who is focusing on Paramatma, the negative aspects. We have now seen positive aspects, stay away from everything, mind, sama, all of those things. The negative aspects come into picture. What are the negative aspects? Some spurs jab hoga, right? So, dukha yone evate, because the sub-sparsha, the contact with the material senses, sparsha, tanmatras, that is the sense objects, they are the yonis. Yonis means they are the seed of dukkha. So if someone is trying to stay away from dukkha yoni, that is a negative indication of the activity over there. So they stay away from dukkha yoni. So that is stay away from the material senses. And adi antvanta. Why? Because the material world has Adi and Ant. Anything that has any kind of sukha coming from the material world, from samsara, will always have start and end. Anything that is both start and end are causing agitation or kunta. And by definition, a yogi wants to get into state of Vaikunta. So anything that is start, Adi or Ant, will give kunta. And na teshu ramate buddha. So one intelligent, he doesn't ramate. Ramate means enjoys in any of these things. Anything that is Adi and Ant, and anything that is coming from externals, that is coming from the yoni or the birthplace of dukkha. So that's one thing that they stay away from. Another thing that they stay away from is Shakno, they have yes sodum. So sodum means they tolerate while in their body. Praktishi before sharir and vimoksha. Vimoksha means they give up. So sharir, before they give up this sharir, kama, krodha, bhavam, vegam. So kama, luster, krodha, anger, and udbhava means one that arises, give rise to vegam, the force. So urges, as Svabhava translates here. So the urges that come from kama and krodha, both of them, they kind of stay away from sayukta sukhidara. So if they get it, then this is a phala shruti or phala panti, is that one who is yukta like this, then they will get sukha. So two negative aspects about a self-realized person who's focusing on Paramatma, about 5-6 positive aspects. So this is what is making up this section of chapter 5 of how to do Krishna Karma Yoga or Nishkam Karma Yoga in Krishna consciousness. And so far we have seen that how this chapter is different from chapter 3. Chapter 3 was talking about Karma Yoga, but so the basic subset about Karma Yoga, some about Sakam Karma Yoga is there. Then chapter 3 is talking about other aspects. We'll get back. But chapter 5 is now going from normal Nishkam Karma Yoga more towards Brahman oriented or Krishna oriented. And that is why this chapter 5 is an advanced form of Karma Yoga. So then the next verse talks about, again, one thing over here is, so what is the harsha or the outcome of someone who does this, right? So they become Brahma Bhuta, okay, or Brahma Nirvana they get. So Brahma Nirvana, let us just find what Brahma Nirvana in this chapter. 6 occurrences, 24, 25, 26. So let's go back to 24. So anta sukho anta aramas. So what is the characteristic of person who has now pursued this path where they focus onto Paramatma? They get Brahma Nirvana, and their characteristics are anta sukhi. Anta means internal, sukhi. They are internally happy. Anta aramas. So they are enjoying arama. Ramana is where you get pleasure out of something. So anta aramas means one is getting pleasure from inside. So he's happy inside. He's getting pleasure from inside. That two different things. One is a recipient of pleasure. One is origin of pleasure. So that's why two different phrases over here. And antar jyoti. So that doesn't mean is jyoti, illumination or his knowledge. His as Svabhava transfer aimed. So he's targeting or he's aiming to hone his meditation internally. So everything is internal. Sa yogi Brahma Nirvana Brahma Bhuta Adhikacha. Adhikacha means goes. So he will go to be status of Brahma Bhuta. So Brahma Nirvana, he gets a liberation in the Supreme Nirvana. Vana means what does Vana mean? I think it means form, and Nirvana means without form, and therefore because Brahman is the formless aspect about the Advaita Tattva, and therefore when one reaches, becomes Brahma Bhuta and then they get Mukti, then that's why it is said that they get to the status of Nirvana, one without form. So this is one characteristic of a person who has to pursue or achieve Labante Nirvana. Next aspect about one who achieves Brahma Nirvana means Labate Brahma Nirvana, one who gets Brahma, who are Rishya, right? Shida Kalmasha. Shida means mitigate, diminish, reduce. Kalmasha. Kalmasha is perturbations or tribulations. So there are tribulations about the sansara. anartha nivritti happens. Okay, so the anarthas all go down. Chinna dveda. Chinna means cut down. Dveda, duality. So their duality cuts away. Now, what's duality? Happiness, sadness, cold, winter. Right? We understand that for the material world, but isn't the fact that we, at least in Krishna consciousness, take soul as eternally existent and independent, it is still dependent for its sukha or for nourishing itself for the Lord. But the fact that they're two separate entities, is that also not duality? That too is duality. But how is this duality different than that duality? And if it is not, then why is Chinna Dvada said over here? So this Dvada is Chinna is or cutting of duality of the material world. Why? Because if you notice, there's matter and spirit in the material world, right? So matter doesn't have consciousness. Soul, as I think Krishna clarifies, chapter 7, I think, that is higher energy and inferior energy. So in material world, even though there are two entities present, two tattva present, two elements present, one is the matter, one is the spirit, they do have duality, and they are essentially distinct. Whereas in the spiritual world, while Jiva, soul, obviously is purified, and Paramatma, or in his form is Bhagavan, or whatever feature is there, Vishnu, the duality is only in respect to rasa, the interaction. But the nature is same, qualitatively same, quantitatively different, right? We know that. So that duality is the one that is not something that is relative. So what this is talking about is duality that is relative. For example, someone says that there is winter and summer, or cold water and hot water, right? But we can try an experiment. If you put your a hand in water which is very hot, and then you put your water, like a hand, inside warm water, then you won't feel it is warm. It will actually feel cold, because there's relative experience. So the duality that is discussed in the material world is of relative in nature, because whatever you're talking respect to is also relative, because this world is essentially in an illusion of understanding, or it has an illusory understanding, and therefore the duality over here is not the one that should be sustained. So Chinna Dveda Yatatmana. Yata means one who does pursuit, and Atmana, inter mind. So one who is trying to realize their self-realization. Sarvbhut hite rata. So another characteristic of people who get Brahman is Sarvbhuta hite. The hite means one who does helps other people, or their Svabhava said welfare work. I think maybe that's better. Sarvbhuta, all entities. So they are always engaged. And this is also in chapter 12, I think, when Arjuna asked Krishna that which one is better, is personalism better or impersonalism, and Krishna clarifies that personalism is better, but by the way, even the impersonalists ultimately come to Brahman itself. They also come to be, but their path is one where they have to go through a lot of problem, and they also talk about that they have to go through, they also do Sarvbhutite. I mean, basically they also do welfare work for that. So that's a natural consequence, because they lack the presence of quantitatively bigger Lord, the Vibhu, in their life. So the Anus help other Anus. And Anu relationship is pursued, because there's a natural selflessness that comes in with yoga. Anyway, so three verses on Brahma Nirvana. So two we have seen. But the point is, none of these seem to be easy. It's very difficult for someone to say, okay, can you actually practice Antaramas or Antarjyoti, or can you practice rejoice within? So therefore, Krishna gives a reprieve in verse number 26. One who can control his kama krodha, and if they can control their mind through yogic practice, then too they can get Brahma Nirvana. So this looks like an easier path out of the 3, 24, 25, 26, is where they can achieve the supreme through kama krodha control. Okay, and then after that, the chapter ends with certain verses that talk about prelude to the next chapter, which is Ashtanga Yoga, how to get mukti via Ashtanga Yoga, and then the peace formula, which is the Bhoktaram Yagatapsam Sarlok Maheshwar Swadam Sasbhutaram Yathamam Shamde Richati. So very peculiar aspect about this verse, about last verse, and we'll go back to our second theme. So we covered chapter 5 now and connecting it to 2, 3, 4, 5 subsequently. So Bhoktaram and Yagya Tapasam. So Bhoktaram and Yagya is beneficiary of sacrifices. This is typically the goal of karma kandis and karma yogis. Tapasam, so tapasa, that means austerities and penances, this is typically the goal of Gyan yogis. And Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, all the lokas, all places where living beings exist, Maheshwara, Maha Ishvara. Ishvara is controller, Maha Ishvara is the supreme controller, the big controller. Typically Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, that tier is called Maha Ishvara. Demigod also called Ishvara, they are called Petty, Anu Ishvara. I made that term up, by the way. So what kind of yogi's goal is that? So this is typically the people who want to pray to demigods. So their goal is Sarvaloka Maheshwara. So they want to aim or target Maheshwara in their practices. Then Suhadam, Sarvita. Who is Suhada? Suhada is one who is a benefactor. Su, positive. Hada, corrected from, like, I think from the heart, so heart soul. And Suhada, Sarvbhutanam. So of all living entities, that is a goal for everyone. Everyone wants to help Sarvbhutanam, but Suhadam is the goal of Ashtanga yogis. So they want to be benefactor, but how do they want to benefit? Through their meditation. So once again, all different kind of yoga destinations are covered here. When Krishna describes himself saying, hey, if someone pursues me, then they get Shanti. Richati means gets. So Gyatva Mam Shanti Richati. So this is a peace formula. They'll get Shanti. This is the minimum outcome of any yoga practice path. Even though in interim or target destinations may seem a little different. Bhoktaram for Karmakanda and Karma Yogis, Bhoktaram Yagya, and then Tapasam, once again, Gyan Yogis, and Sarvaloka Maheshwaras for demigod worshippers, Karmakandis, even Sakam Karma Yogis, yeah, and Suhadams, Ashtanga Yogis, and Sarvbhutanam for all of them. So I think one thing to note over here is that while Suhadam is mentioned over here, there are a couple of types of friends. Not everyone is Suhada. So there are Bandhu based on body bandhan, then Mitra, right? So thought alignment, like we have natural respect for each other, like Vaishnavas have it. Then Sakha. So Sakha is based on personal quality. So they desire to live with each other's company, like Krishna's Sakha, right? They are all his friends. And Suhada, based on affection and mood of service. So there's Shanagati, or exchange of secrets, also happen in Suhada. So there are different categories of how people friends. So while friend is a good English term, it doesn't go down to the depth of analyzing further into what are the different consciousness level. And since we talked about consciousness level, and we are ended chapter 5, let's now connect back to how these various chapters have also connected to other means. So what is the official means? Let's go back. Official means is chapter 1, Arjuna had questions. Chapter 2, Krishna says, do Nishkam Karma Yoga, you'll be fine. Chapter 3, for Nishkam Karma Yoga, you need to do Yagya. And when you do Yagya and prescribed duty, then whatever you will get out of it will be, you need to do Yagya, because with Yagya only can you be happy and be able to pursue the path of yoga. Now, to be able to do Yagya, to do your prescribed duty, you have to have some sense control, and all of that will only come to transcendental knowledge. So chapter number 4, transcendental knowledge is given Krishna's divine knowledge. And once you get that knowledge, then after that, chapter number 5, where you're able to pursue Nishkam Karma Yoga with 2 different destinations. One, in which you focus on the Atma self-realization, and then after getting purity, you can pursue Karma Sannyas. That you can actually stop doing your Vedic activities, or you actually focus not on Atma but on Paramatma, or Brahman, basically the Advaita Tattva over there. And when you do that, then because you're connecting to the Supreme, then you're pursuing the path from, instead of Jnana, you're pursuing the path of Bhakti. And while you do that, then Brahma Nirvana will happen. So that is 2/4 is the aspect that is dealt with chapter number 5. So we corrected chapter 1 to chapter 5 in the official way as the chapters are named and they are designed. However, we'll try to get to the last part of our talk today of how these chapters are also tied to an alternate mechanism, which is what we have discovered as we went past. So from my notes, chapter number 2 is sense control is this underlying secondary theme. Second theme that comes out from chapter number 3 is lust is the enemy, and to curb lust, you have to regulate the senses, but more than senses, you have to control the mind, and to control the mind, you need spiritualized intelligence. So that is what you get from chapter number 4. And from chapter number 4, when we go to chapter number 5, then we find out that for a person who is neither able to get to Svabhava, to Paramatma or to self-realization, Svabhava is the doer. The soul is not the doer. The Vibhu, the Lord is not the doer, but the doer is Svabhava. So if we write these things down, then what is Svabhava? So let's go into that aspect now. Let's stop sharing and go to the screen. Share screen. Okay. So if we look up the word Svabhava on Veda base, and we find curiously that since we are short of time, that no better person than Keshava Krishna in his Paganda Leela and the Govardhan Leela, he talks about Svabhava. And so let's go through that and understand what essentially is Svabhava, because over there in chapter number 5, it was just put in as modes of nature, right? So over here, just before Govardhan lifting happens, Krishna is there with the Brahmana's wives, and that Leela has just ended. And over there, Krishna's father and all the villagers, they were collected together. They started doing yajna for Indra. And when Krishna hears the statements of his fathers, he addresses his father as follows: to arouse anger in Lord Indra, because he had a two-pronged objective. So what is it that he was talking about? Let's go into look into that chapter, verse number 13 of 24th chapter of Canto 10. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Karmana Jayate Jantu Karmana Praliyate Sukham Dukham Bhayam Shemam Karmana Vabhidpadyate. So what he's saying is, it is by force of karma. So Krishna is giving the karma mansa philosophy here. Force of karma, a living entity takes birth. It is by karma alone that he meets his destruction. His happiness, distress, fear, and sense of security all arise as effects of karma. Okay, so this is the karma philosophy. Next, I think we're short of time, so I won't read the verse. Even Krishna goes on to say, even if there is some supreme controller who awards all others the results of the activities, he must depend on the performers engaging in activity. In other words, now the supreme controller is also dependent on the activity getting performed, and therefore he is also under the purview of karma. So this is the karma mimamsa philosophy. Go on further. Next verse. Living beings in this world, and this is where I think Svabhava comes. Let me see. So living beings in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of human beings, which is born of their own nature, there is a Svabhava. Why should people worship him? So Swa, self, Bhava, their orientation, which is over here one's conditioned nature, but basically what is their natural way of thinking, activity, dealing with the world. So this is the Svabhava. Next verse. Svabhava tantro hijana. Every individual is under the control of his own conditioned nature, and thus he must follow that nature. This entire universe with all its demigods, demons, human beings is based on the conditioned nature of the living entities. So once again over Svabhava over here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so Svabhava, Krishna is saying, Svabhava tantro, under the control of the conditioned nature. Svabhava anuvartate, his nature they follow, follow vartate. Svabhava stham, they are based stham, sthita, based on the Svabhava. So their orientation or I think what we call in the karma, types of karma, kutam, vijam, yeah, kutam, right? The propensities of someone based on their karma. So when you do karma, you get prarabdha, aprarabdha, right? Start with aprarabdha, it becomes seed, and then aprarabdha stays in our heart, and that gives our orientation towards various situations. And prarabdha is what we bear. So karma results, karma phala is prarabdha. Karma phala in future, rain check for future is our kutam. So that is our orientation, inclination towards how we approach under various circumstances which are created by our past karma. What do you do in those circumstances? Even though we have free will, we are bound by, or rather we are forced by our inclination, and that is our Svabhava, right? So Svabhava is coming from this aspect. Let's go on. Krishna says in purport, Lord Krishna here elaborates upon the argument given the previous. Since everything depends on Svabhava or one's conditioned nature, why bother worshipping God or demigods? The argument would be sublime if Svabhava or conditioned nature were all powerful. But unfortunately, it is not. There is a supreme controller, you worship him, etc. etc. So next verse. Because it is karma that causes a conditioned living entity to accept and then give up different higher lower grade material bodies, this karma is his enemy, friend, and neutral witness, his spiritual master and controlling Lord. How is it? So it is said, I think, Brahma Samhita, that everything from Indra Gopa, Mathavendram, everyone from Indra all the way to Indra Gopa, right? That small insect, everyone is under the karma results. Swakarma bandhanu rupa. They are bandhan, that means they are tied by their swakarma, right? And the other verses over here. And let's go on to the next verse. Tasmat sampujayat karma swabhavastham. So in the position corresponding to a stha, remaining. So stham is stationed in Svabhava. Therefore, one should seriously worship work itself. So Krishna is giving all false logic over there. A person should remain in the position corresponding to his nature, should perform his own duty. Indeed, that by which we may nicely live is really a worshipable deity. So this part of the advice that is given by Krishna is kind of lower knowledge, is what chapter 3 has, right? Perform a prescribed duty. From a prescribed duty, yajna will come, and from your yajna, you will be able to light happily in whatever yoga, sakam yoga, or whatever your material consciousness is. If your material consciousness is high, then you'll be doing nishkam, otherwise sakam, right? So the fact that you need to be doing your duty based on your svabhava is where we are trying to sum up now. Let me get that. Yeah. So svabhava is our bhava or material consciousness. Let me write this down. And this is how we'll connect the chapters once again. Svabhava from chapter 5 determines our, and so how Svabhava decided? It is decided based on what karma we have done and what is the conscious at the time of prayana kale. So whatever consciousness we have, chapter 8, that's a consciousness based on that, we'll get a body to lead a life based on that consciousness. Whatever karma we have done is the quality of life that we'll get. Two different things, karma, consciousness. Consciousness determines our body, karma determines the quality of life in that body. So the Svabhava is coming from our consciousness. So that one we saw. So this will determine our varna, because it will determine the body that we'll get, and because in the human species we have 4 lakh yonis. So therefore, which material consciousness is where will be stationed? Will that be that of a Shudra, or that of a Kshatriya, or of a Brahmana? That determination of our varna will be determined by the Svabhava that came as our package into this life. And that varna will determine our prescribed duty. And that prescribed duty, we saw, will determine our yajna. And this is chapter 3. And that yajna will lead over time to transcendental knowledge. As I think Krishna had said that in the, I think the chapter 4. that all yagyas, I'm not able to find it for right now, but basically all yagyas end up in transcendental knowledge. So jnana. So, and this transcendental knowledge will burn away all our kalmasha, all our tribulations, right? For lack of better word, our karmic knots, to open up our path to higher enjoyment, both in this world and external world. And with that, we'll be able to perform first. Oh, by the way, transcendental knowledge also spiritualizes our intelligence. With a spiritualized intelligence, we'll be able to steady our mind. This is chapter number 3. With a steady mind, we'll be able to do sense control. With a sense control, we'll be able to get out of tribulations, kalmasha, and therefore we will be sthita pragya, that is chapter number 2, and therefore what we started with chapter number 1 or chapter 2 with is confusion on how or what to do in life. So that's another connection that can be established from chapter 5 going back all the way to chapter 1 in a secondary theme, which is not necessarily connected to the one that is more popular one, which is the path of yoga. So once again, just repeat this and we can end with this is chapter number 5 tells Svabhava is the doer. Svabhava is dependent, it determines our material consciousness, the current life, and our varna. The varna, this determines what is the prescribed duty. The prescribed duty tells us what is the yajna that one should be doing. And this is chapter 4 actually. And so let me write down chapter 4 here. And it gives us transcendental knowledge, that is chapter number 4. This is spiritualizes our intelligence. This is chapter 3 end. And it studies our mind, chapter 3 end. And actually, we should write down over here spiritual intelligence. Yeah, so steady mind, sense control. With this, lust will be controlled. That is the other aspect of it. Lust will be conquered, not just controlled. And therefore, our kalmasha will end. So this is number 2. Actually, this one we can take off. So Sthit Pragya, one will become Sthit Pragya, chapter number 2. And therefore, the confusion that arose in chapter number 1 will end. So this is our like your bhakti yoga ladder, yoga ladder. Let's call it the Bhagavad Gita secondary ladder through the first 5 chapters. So with that, I think that was my objective, to try to establish a secondary connection between all of these chapters, how logically they are connected, and what Krishna is giving out as the essential message. With that, I can end. I don't know if there are any questions. Sorry, I went a little over time. If not, then I think we can end over here. There's a lot more to be said about Svabhava. I don't think we have time, but all I'm saying is Chaitanya Charitamrita, maybe I can show for 1 second and then we can end after that. Talks a lot about other types of Svabhava. So we only talk about the material Svabhava, right? Let me share my screen for 5 seconds and then I think we can end after that. So if we do Veda-based search for the word Svabhava and filter it out by Chaitanya Charitamrita and then go to Adi, Madhya, Anta Leelas. So there are various other Svabhavas that are like the positive Svabhava, the spiritual Svabhavas. Ashwara Svabhava, Bhakta Svabhava, Bhavera Svabhava, Dakshina Svabhava. Let's just take one example over here from the Adi Leela. The influence of Radhara Vishuddha Bhavera Achinta Prabhava Ye Krishtera Karaila Dvi Bhuja Swabhava. The influence of Radharani's pure ecstasy is so inconceivably great that it forced Krishna to come to his original two-armed form, spiritual Swabhava. Another one over here from Adi Leela 783. Krishna Nama Maha Mantrera Aitha Swabhava Yai Jape Tara Krishna Upajaye Bhava. So what is this Swabhava? It is the nature of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra that anyone who chants it immediately develops a loving ecstasy for Krishna. So these are some of the examples of Svabhava from the Adi Leela. Then similarly from Adi Leela, Svabhava Gune, Jivera Svabhava, Karuna Svabhava, compassion, Mahant Svabhava, Narada Svabhava, Prabhura Svabhava, Ishvara Svabhava, Shantera Svabhava, Shantrasa Svabhava. So many Svabhavas over there. And then in the Anta Leela, we have other Svabhavas. Yeah. And once again, Ashwara Svabhava, Bhakta Svabhava, Bhavera Svabhava, Dakshina Svabhava. Let's look at this. What is Dakshina Svabhava? Gadadhara Panditera Shuddha Gala Bhava. Rukmini Devi Rayache Dakshina Svabhava. Gadadhar Pandit's pure ecstatic love for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also very deep. It was like that of Rukmini Devi, who was always especially submissive to Krishna. So it's a Svabhava. Dakshina means south, means bow down, humble yourself, gentle. So it is submissive. Vidya Vinaya Sampannai, right? That one. So that is one Svabhava. Just like that, there are a lot of other ones. There's infinite things that can be talked about, the positive Svabhavas. But since we are focusing on the first few chapters of Bhagavad Gita, we talked a lot about the ones. So thank you very much. Really appreciate. We can end now. Hare Krishna. We can end with one chakal patubhacha ke paas duve chapatita nam pavne bhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Thank you, Grace Mataji. Thank you, everyone who helped, who joined the live stream from various sources, who will be listening to this in future. And thanks everyone who could not make it but have me in their heart and their prayers. Please keep blessing me, and anything good or bad. Thanks and sorry if I think that is bad. With that, I think I will end. Hare Krishna.